Hi everybody. I am making two YouTube videos for you guys today. One is going to be a reading wrap-up, going through ratings of books that I've finished in the past couple of weeks, and the second one will be reading progress for current books that I have started reading. These books are for my TBR for the end of January and beginning of February that I picked up at the library yesterday. Let's see here. We're going back to okay, so at the beginning of the month, I read A Cat from Our World in the Forgotten, which was a Japanese manga book about cats, which I reviewed in my video about 5 books that remind me of Phoebe Buffay. To go along with that similar theme, I just finished this book yesterday, which I picked up at the library last week, called We'll Prescribe You a Cat, which is a translated novel about a pharmacy in Tokyo that prescribes cats to solve people's ailments. It's very cute, very sweet. I got on such a kick last year of reading translated novels, and this is the first translated novel that I read this year. Can't wait for many more. This you will get 5 stars, and so did the book that I told you about in the video about Phoebe. The next book that I have returned to the library already is Dragon Teeth by Michael Crichton. This is by the same person who wrote Jurassic Park, and much like Jurassic Park, I really loved the sci-fi nature of this book and how it focuses on like the anatomy of the dragons and whatever. And I just love Michael Crichton's writing style. I gave Dragon Teeth 4.5 stars. The next book I wanted to talk about is Persepolis 2, the story of a return. So this is the sequel to Persepolis, which is a graphic novel by Marjane Satrapi. She is a woman who fled Iraq in the 2000s to immigrate to the United States during the war that happened, that started from when 9/11 happened. And I gave both of these graphic novels in this series 5 stars, and I highly recommend them. If you have read I Am Malala, it tells a similar story about a girl from a war-torn country and the challenges she overcomes during the time that the war happens. The next book I wanted to talk about is The Marriage Method. This is the sequel to Rules for Ruin by Mimi Matthews, which I read last year. It's a mystery novel that's set during the same time period as Pride and Prejudice, and I really enjoyed it. Mimi Matthews also writes a great Regency romance series that has awesome disability representation in it. I highly recommend this author. If you have never read anything by her, please check it out. The most recent book in the series with the Regency romances with disability representation is called The Muse of Maiden Lane, that came out last November. And Mimi Matthews was an author who was recommended to me by Emma and Jess at These Lyrics and Lines, who I really missed their videos. They haven't come out with anything new recently, so I hope that they're doing okay. The next book is called Second Chance Romance. This is the second book in the Harlot's Bay series by Olivia Dade. She writes a lot of romance books with plus-size characters in them, and I really love her writing style. The first book in this series was called At First Bite, which I read in 2024 at recommendation of my friend Kate. And like that book, I gave Second Chance Romance 4.5 stars. The next book is called Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. I will be talking about another book by Tiffany D. Jackson that I'm currently reading in the next part of this video. Grown is a book that focuses on our main teenage protagonist, Enchanted, and her romance that she develops with a very popular hip-hop singer named Corey. And I feel like this was inspired by the R. Kelly sexual assault case that happened in 2012. Maybe I'm wrong. That's just the vibe that I got from this book. And I gave it 3.5 stars. I love Tiffany G. Jackson's writing. The first book I read by her was called Blood in the Water, which I read last Halloween. The next book that I read to start off 2025 was Bring Gans and Bread Knives, which is the third book in this series with Lessons and Lattes by Travis Baldree. The Legends and Latte series is basically like Pumpkin Spice Cafe characters, Pumpkin Spice Cafe type of setting, but only with fantasy characters in it, and it's really good. It's really heartwarming. I gave Brigands and Bread Knives 5 stars. The next books that I read the second week of the month, well, actually it was the first week of the month because I got these books out on January 5th, was Bad Nature by Ariel Lawton. This was recommended to me by Sunny at a Sunny Book Nook. And it's about a woman who's a lawyer in New York who finds that her dad is dying. So she travels across the country to spend time with him before she dies. I didn't intentionally pick this book for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR, but it ended up fitting in nicely because the main character in this book works in New York City, and she travels across the country to spend time with her dad, who is going to pass away. And her dad abandoned her when she was younger. So this main character reminds me of Phoebe and her relationship with her dad, who appears in the episode, the one with Joey's bag, where the grandmother has her funeral. The next book is The Merge. This was a sci-fi novel it's set in a dystopian time, and it focuses on our main character, Amelia, and her mother, and they merge brains as part of a medical test because her mother has Alzheimer's. Gabby Rees recommended this book to me, and I loved it. As somebody who has dealt with losing 2 relatives to Alzheimer's disease, I just thought the concept for this book was super cool and wish that this kind of procedure existed where somebody who has Alzheimer's can merge with somebody who has a brain that doesn't have Alzheimer's so they can maintain their memories. The next book that I read this month for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is called Earthlings by Sagu Marata. This is the same person who wrote Convenience Store Woman. This is another translated author that I discovered last year. I'm going to be talking about this book a little bit more in my From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR wrap-up that I do in my end of my bi-monthly entertainment wrap-up video with Matt at the end of February. So you will hear more about my thoughts on that book later on. The next book that I read earlier this month, was The Secret Summer Promise by Kaya Brown. I found this book on a recommendations list for books called Disability December, which is a readathon that encourages people to read about books with disabled characters in them. And the main character in this book has cerebral palsy, but from what I gather from learning about this character throughout the book, she seems to have a more serious version of cerebral palsy. Like, I have a mild case of it, and like I'm able to walk and stuff, but she has she's not in a wheelchair, but she still has issues with her balance and stuff. And this is about a second chance romance she has with a friend from high school. The main girl in this book with cerebral palsy, her name is Andrea, and then her love interest name is Haley. And I love the reconnection they made and how their relationship built up. The next book that I read this month was Fallen City, which was Adrian Young's release from September 2025. Adrian Young came out with 2 books last year, Fallen City and A Sea of Unspoken Things. A Sea of Unspoken Things was released in January, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I didn't like it. I felt like the plot of that book was rehashed from her earlier YA book called Spells for Forgetting. I gave Spells for Forgetting 4.5 stars. I've also read The Unmaking of June Farrow by her, which I gave 5 stars. And then this book, Fallen City, which came out last September, as I just said, I gave this book 4.5 stars. So the couple in this book is on opposite sides of a war, so that's what makes their romance much more intense, and the stakes are much higher than in other books that I've read that are either romance books or fantasy books. And I love Adrian Young's writing. As I was saying, I have read a lot of her books, and I have enjoyed every single one except for A Sea of Unspoken Things. I gave Fallen City 4.5 stars. The next book that I wanted to mention is called Coffin Moon. This was on my Winterween TBR for Gabby Reeves' marathon. That ended on the 16th. Also for Winterween, I read The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, The Mating Game by Lana Ferguson, and Julie Chan is Dead by Leon Zhang. Coffin Moon was a new book for me this year. It was by a new author named Keith Rawson. It is set in the Pacific Northwest, and it's about a guy who is a recovering alcoholic who works in a bar, which is a very weird place for a recovering alcoholic to be working. So a vampire walks into his bar, and basically he spends the rest of the book going on a road trip with his niece, who's 16 years old. Her name's Julia, and I love the bond that they share throughout the road trip. I think it's very sweet. So I really want to read more from this author who wrote Coffin Moon, because I really liked his writing style, and I just loved the atmosphere of Coffin Moon. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read for Winterween was a reread. A majority of my books for Winterween were rereads, actually. Julie Chan is Dead was a new release from last year, which I read during Summerween, which is Gabby's summer horror thriller marathon. And it's a story of a girl named Chloe who lives in California, and she gets an email from her sister Julie, who's this huge social media influencer in New York City. Hey, come visit me. So when she goes to New York City to find her sister ends up dead. So she basically takes over her sister's personality as a social media influencer. This thriller kept me on the edge of my seat. It kept me guessing and wondering what was going to happen next to the rest of Julie's friends, who were the social influencers. So I highly recommend this book. It was really good. The next book I read for Winterween is called The Mating Game by Lana Ferguson. This was Lana Ferguson's release from December. And it's a winter-themed wolf shifter romance. I have read 2 other books by Lana Ferguson. Another romance with fantastical creatures. This was her new release from last year, Under Lock and Key, which is about a girl who falls in love with the Loch Ness Monster. 2.5 stars for that one. The Mating Game got 3.5 stars. And the other book that I read by Lana Ferguson in November was called The Nanny. And it's basically, if you watch the show The Nanny in the 1990s with Fran Drescher, the main character in The Nanny is very similar to Fran Fine. And then the main guy, Aiden, who has the same character name to a character from Sex and the City, is like Mr. Sheffield's character. So you should read this book if you liked The Nanny as much as I did. And I gave it 4.5 stars. So as you can tell, my ratings for Lana Ferguson's books are like all over the place. I think I'm done reading her books, though. I don't think her books interest me as much as I thought that they did. The next book I wanted to mention was The Lost City of Z. This was a nonfiction book that I read that talks about a lost and abandoned city that's in the Amazon rainforest. If you have heard of the movie from the 1990s, it's a very little known animated movie from DreamWorks, I believe, called The Road to El Dorado. El Dorado is actually mentioned in this book, so you learn a lot about that place in the Amazon rainforest. Very interesting. 4.5 stars. The next book that I picked up was part of my 10 before the end TBR, which was my end of the year TBR from last year. It was a book that carried over from that TBR because I didn't exactly finish that TBR by December 31st. Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I think I'm done with this author too, quite frankly. I read Never by her last year, which was a Peter Pan retelling. Wasn't a big fan of the writing style. Wasn't a big fan of the writing style in Magnolia Parks either. So as much as I want to read Daisy Hates, I don't think I'm going to be continuing this series because I could not stand BJ and Magnolia. They were very annoying. And I don't really understand why this series is so hyped up. I don't get the hype at all, actually. So I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book that I recently read was Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance. I can't remember where I heard about this book. It was in a recent video wrap up. I have to go back and look through all my this is a time travel magical realism book about a girl who travels back in time to the time of like The Great Gatsby to learn more about this person from that time period named Kitty St. Clair. It was good. This was my first book by this author, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book is The Summer War, which is a 120-page novella by Naomi Novik, who wrote the Scholomance trilogy. And I have read other books by her, such as Spinning Silver, and there was another book I read by her. I forgot what it's called. But yes, I love her writing. All of the books that I have read by her got between 4 and 5 stars. This book was no different. The next book is called The Enchanted Greenhouse. This is the second book in the series with The Spell Shop, which I read last year and gave 5 stars to. I also gave The Enchanted Greenhouse 4.5 stars. The couple in this book was basically Luke and Lorelai from Gilmore Girls, but put them in a fantasy setting. I loved this author's writing, and you should definitely check her out. The author's name is Sarah Beth Durst. The next book is called What Kind of Paradise by Janelle Brown. This was one of the fiction nominees for the Goodreads Choice Awards last year, and I really, really loved it. It's like a family drama book, and I just love the buildup of the tension. This was my first book by this author, too, so I really can't wait to read more from her. The next book is called Close Your Eyes and Count to 10. This is a thriller book by a new thriller author to me. Her name is Lisa Unger, and it is set on a reality TV show that's one big game of hide and seek. I was on the edge of my seat this whole time, trying to figure out, like, what was going to happen next in this game of hide and seek. Intense. Highly recommended. I can't wait to read more books by Lisa Unger. Whoops. Okay, next we have The Rachel Incident. This is my second book by Caroline O'Donoghue. I read a book by her last October. So The Rachel Incident takes place in Ireland in the early 2000s. It focuses on this girl named Rachel who is in college, and she gets into a relationship with her professor, and he gets her pregnant. So you can tell that my theme for this month is about books with characters that have relationship with their teachers, because I also read The Love Hypothesis this month by Ellie Hazelwood. So this was my second book by Caroline O'Donoghue, and I love her writing style. The other book that I read at Halloween time last year was called All Your Hidden Gifts, and it's a fantasy book that's based around tarot cards. So if you're into tarot cards, you will like All Your Hidden Gifts. The next book that I read was a DNF, one of my first DNFs of this year. DNF means did not finish. This was Riley Sager's release from last July called Risk the Vengeance. It's basically a reimagining of Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, which I read last year and enjoyed it. But this book really was slow to get into, and I made it 50% through but had to stop because I just lost engagement. So I gave that book 2.5 stars. The next book is a book that I found on a fiction shelf at the library. It's called The Girls Who Grew Big, which is a book that's set in Florida in the early 2000s, maybe. And it's set about a bunch of teenage girls who are pregnant, who are living in Florida and starting a family together. I love the found family about all of these girls who are pregnant. It's really sweet. And I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next book is called Maya and Natasha by Elise Dunham. This is another new author that I discovered on the fiction shelf at the library. And so this book, I'm going to pitch it to you guys as the movie Black Swan, but raise the stakes higher because the feuding ballerinas are twin sisters. I loved this book, and I can't wait to read more from this author. 4.5 stars. The next book I was going to talk about is Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. This was recommended to me by Carly at the PastelBookshelf, and she made a video at the beginning of December about winter thriller books. I feel like also Sarah Without an H and Riley Marie have both talked about this author. This is a horror book set in an abandoned hunting cabin in the woods, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time reading this. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Another horror book that I read recently is called When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. So Nat Cassidy is another one of those authors who has been a missed author for me because, excuse me, because I have read his 2 previous books, Nestlings and Mary, and didn't like either of them. So I went into reading When the Wolf Comes Home. Cautiously optimistic. This book focuses on a girl named Jess, who is an actress in a local community theater, and on her way home from rehearsal one night, she finds this little boy hiding in the bushes who's running away from home, and she asks more about him, and his dad is abusive. And it's the abuse plot line is really sad, but his dad is also turning into a werewolf, and that was the interesting part of this plot line. I'm pretty sure the shifting into a werewolf had a lot to do with what was making him angry. That was the vibe I was getting. So I could not put this book down. I finished it in about 2 days, which on average I usually finish a book between 2 to 4 days. So yeah, 5 stars for When the Wolf Comes Home. The next book that I got from the library, something I picked up earlier this week. This is V.E. Schwab's YA book, Gallant. This focuses on a girl named Olivia who is mute, and she is finding out the mystery of what happened to her mom, who died when she was younger, and she gets invited to the family mansion, which is in the woods, and it's a haunted manor. And so she is warned not to go beyond the wall because something is hidden there that she shouldn't be seeing. Of course, she doesn't listen. But I don't want to spoil this book for you, but that aspect of it about finding something that's hidden reminds me of The Secret Garden. I have also read oh my god. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I love her writing style, but again, she's been another hit or miss author. This book got 4.5 stars, and so did in Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, which was her release from July of last year. But excuse me. I am in the unpopular opinion of people who did not like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I just found that the pacing was too slow, and Addie was also very unlikable. I did not like her. The next book that I read this month is a book I was given to by my aunt for Christmas. It is called Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty. I love her thriller books. I have also read The Hypnotist Love Story and 9 Perfect Strangers. And much like The Hypnotist Love Story, this book was in between 4.5 and 5 stars for me. I really enjoyed getting to know these characters and going on this journey with them as they solve this mystery. This was turned into an HBO show by Reese Witherspoon's production company, Hello Sunshine. And I do not have HBO, so I was wondering if anybody knows if this show is available on DVD, because if it is, I will put it on hold at the library very shortly. The next book is another sequel that I read. It's called Wreck. This is the sequel to Sandwich by Catherine Newman. It's set on Cape Cod. I have read Sandwich twice, and I just loved these characters, so I was really excited when I heard this book was being released last fall. It came out in October, which is the perfect setting because this book is set during the fall time on Cape Cod. And I just loved getting reacquainted with these characters after reading Sandwich. And, so this book was 5 stars also. The next book that I read was another reread, The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhorn. I borrowed this from the library last year, fell in love with it, got it for my birthday with a gift card that I got to Main Street Bookends of Warner. This is a historical fiction mystery book that is set in Maine in the 1800s. It's about a midwife who goes on a journey to discover why people that she helps give birth are going missing. I really enjoy this and highly recommend it. 5 stars. The next book is Colleen Hoover's new release from very recently. I feel like this came out a couple of weeks ago. I've been on a Colleen Hoover kick for January because I have read Regretting You and Reminders of Him for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR. And then I heard Gabby Reeds talk about this in one of her recent videos where she was looking for a 5-star read. I can't remember what she gave this book. I don't think it was 5 stars though. And I can see where she's coming from. I feel like this book is very semi-autobiographical because I can tell that when Colleen Hoover wrote this book, she was probably reeling from all of the negative press that the movie of It Ends With Us was getting, because this is focused around an author. Her name is Petra, and her book has recently been adapted into a movie, and it gets mixed reviews and negative and drama centered around it in the press, kind of like what happened with the End With Us movie. Out of the 3 Colleen Hoover books I have read this month, I gave Regretting You 4.5 stars, Reminders of Him 5 stars, and this book gets 3.5. The final book I wanted to talk about in the first half of this video is called See You Yesterday by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I have also read Weather Girl and Business or Pleasure by this author. This book is one of the books in her backlist catalog that I picked up at the Barnes & Noble's cafe when I went book shopping last week. So this book focuses on Barrett, who is a girl who is starting college, and it's basically, if you have seen the movie Groundhog Day, it's a similar plot where this girl goes back in time to constantly fix her mistakes, and this is focused on a girl who's just starting college, and she's starting at a new college. Like, that's a different atmosphere. She's starting over in college. Like, I'm watching season 4 of Gilmore Girls right now, and Rory is going to Yale, and I just saw the episode where her and Paris are roommates, which is interesting. I would have never expected Rory and Paris to be roommates, but honestly, I feel them so relatable. They are such relatable characters in this season of Gilmore Girls because, Paris wants to start over brand new with this college. Rory wants nothing to do with socializing and partying. I'm more like Rory, honestly, because in college I was not a big partier. I was more into books and studying like she was. So I really like this. If you are into the whole plot line of going back in time to fix mistakes, kind of like The Do-Over by Lynn Painter, I think you will really like this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. So part 2 of this video will be coming soon, where I will be talking about the rest of my TBR for January/February. Stay tuned.